Remember how I said I was going to start framing my video ideas around something I can shamelessly piggyback off of for clicks? Well, looks like it's time for a Mega Man themed video. Oh, and before we start, if you want a fun drinking game, take a drink every time I say the word Mega Man. I bet you won't even make it through the list.
Super fighting robot, Mega Man. Super fighting robot.
The Mega Man Zero/ZX collection is the perfect example of how many different spin-off titles and different series are under the Mega Man umbrella. And while a lot of them are fairly similar variations of action, platformer, pew-pew games, there's a few random one-offs in the bunch that are just different. So, this time I wanted to touch on some of the weirdest ones. There's really no rules to this list, but I tried to stick with games that aren't in any kind of numbered series. So while they are all tied to something related to the Blue Bomber, they're single game spin-offs. Nothing that spawned its own numbered series like Mega Man Legends or Star Force. Even though they are pretty different from the regular Mega Man formula for the most part. But anyway, let's start by getting powered up with an honorable mention.
Mega Man Power Up.
This one is kind of cheating since I wanted all the games on this list to be one-off spin-offs, and this is technically a two-game series to start it off, but I'm still including them as a pair because the two are such similar arcade titles that the second game is basically just an extension of the first. These are also the most traditional games on the list, but they're still unique in their own way. They're basically boss rush games, with an even flimsier story to justify that than most Mega Man games have. Each game has a different set of robot masters and playable fighters, but they have the same basic concept. You beat the robot master, take their power, and then move on to the next one. The best part of this boss rush mode is the novelty of co-op, as it's one of the only Mega Man games you can play with a friend. It really mixes up the robot masters even for people extremely familiar with the games, and seeing some of these bosses rendered in higher quality for the first time is also pretty cool. The sequel is even cooler because there's more diversity to the power-ups and an added playable character named Duo, but for some reason that one only gives out one power-up to whoever grabs it, leaving one player terribly underpowered. It does add a lot of cool new abilities to each boss though as they switch to their overdrive mode, and each playable character has new moves also, making the game feel more like an arcade fighting game, whereas the first game was a more traditional Mega Man boss rush game. These games are a lot of fun if you can ever find an arcade cabinet that has them to play with a friend, but let's move on to the actual top 5, because there's a lot of weird to get to.
Mega Man Network Transmission.
Don't be fooled by this flashy cutscene. The game looks nothing like this. I'm not going to beat around the bush. This game sucks. But it's such a weird amalgam of things, I still had to include it on this list because it did try to do something unique and different. It just doesn't work at all. It's funny though because it shows how diverse the Mega Man series is. This is a spin-off of the Mega Man Battle Network series on the Game Boy Advance and DS, and those games are grid-based action RPGs using reimagined Mega Man characters from various games, and some interesting puzzles and unique elemental landscapes. If you're watching this video, you probably have at least a passing knowledge of the various Mega Man series, so I won't focus too much on the lore, but just know this is in that same universe, but has a different playstyle. They basically took that same concept of using battle chips against various enemies, while also having a super wimpy pew-pew shot available at all times that has basically no power and is pretty much useless. You know, classic Mega Man. Sorry, this game is so bad, I can't handle it. Take Roll here, for example. She just told me there's a scary fire robot spewing out lava and blocking her path back to her owner. But look at how chipper she looks! Stop dancing, Roll, this is serious! Anyway, they used those same battle chip mechanics in a traditional side-scrolling platformer where Mega Man jumps and dodges on a 2D plane. I know, I basically just described every Mega Man game, so you'd think this would work, but everything about it just doesn't. One part of that is the Mega Man Battle Network mechanics just don't translate to a more action-oriented platformer. There's pretty limited ammo for any of the battle chips, and considering the variety of chips in the Battle Network series revolve around strategic battlefield manipulation, none of that translates well to a platformer. So most of the chips are just slightly different ways to take out enemies with one shot. But the animations are so slow and chunky, and half the weapons don't work when you're jumping or doing anything really but standing there in front of an enemy. Plus, you're beholden to the selection of chip data sent over at any given time, so sometimes you get stuck with the bottom of the barrel and you're just aimlessly waiting to be able to reload your chips while wandering the uncreative level design. The other issue is, even when the combat works, enemies literally respawn if they leave the screen. So even just exploring the confusing level layouts is a chore, and the fact that they can initiate their attacks from off screen means half the time you get blindsided before you even know what's attacking you. And even worse, that's all there is to the game. There's really nothing of substance here. Even the boss fights are boring and repetitive, with unfair attack patterns to avoid. Game over. Good. Now this game can go back to being forgotten in time.
Mega Man Soccer.
There's actually a long history of mixing Mega Man with sports, but this is the only title that takes it to such a literal extreme. I'll admit, I don't have a lot of experience with this game, but I did rent it on the Super Nintendo as a kid and liked it back then, even if it was a little simple. And that's saying something for a soccer game, because soccer is almost as boring as golf. I'm sorry, soccer fans. I even played on a team as a kid, but I still just don't get the appeal. Anyway, this game was mostly neat at the time for being the first time we saw a lot of classic Robot Masters from the first 4 Mega Man games in 16-bit graphics. But it does do a few cool things with the Mega Man formula also. For one, the main story mode does loosely follow the Mega Man formula, as Dr. Wily and a slew of Robot Masters intervene on a televised soccer game, for some reason. Listen, his plans were never good, but I genuinely don't understand what his intentions were this time. Anyway, Dr. Light modifies Mega Man into the ultimate soccer-playing robot. Kinda cheating, Doc, but whatevs. And sends him out to foil Dr. Wily's sports plot. Cue the classic Robot Master selection screen, and when you pick your opponent, it takes you to a soccer field with a team full of that robot. What did you expect? Then you play soccer. I'm not going to explain the rules of that. I barely understand them myself. I know an unnecessary amount of running is involved, though, and it makes for really boring gameplay footage. Sorry. After winning each match, you rescue the opposing Robot Master onto your team. So by the end, you have a full roster of different boss characters, along with Mega Man and Proto Man. That's where the game gets more unique, as each character has a special attack they can use when kicking the ball, and they mix up the normal strategy as different attacks are better in different situations. In a lot of ways, this game is an early concept of future arcade-style soccer games like Mario Strikers, and I like that one quite a bit for similar reasons, so I have a soft spot in my heart for this game, even though the controls aren't great and the gameplay is painfully slow. I'd love to be a fly on the wall during the pitch meeting for this game, though, because it had to be pretty weird for someone to suggest combining Mega Man with soccer, of all things.
The Misadventures of Tron Bond.
This is actually a weird one I never played growing up. Didn't even know about it back in the day when I got into the Mega Man Legends games. But this is actually a spin-off / prequel of that series, starring its most iconic villain, the titular Tron Bonne. The story is really nothing more than a goofy excuse to justify sending Tron and her servbots on various money-making missions, and the voice acting is hit or miss, but pretty fun and charming, even if the story is kind of dumb.
You're not exactly my type, but if you want to play around a little, I'm game.
What sets us apart is that there's strangely 3 different gameplay styles that are drastically different from each other, and only the action missions really share that much similarity to Mega Man Legends. You basically strafe around 3D landscapes in a giant mech with pretty simple gunplay against random enemies, while the servbots are commanded to rob banks.
It's full of dogs!
The other most common gameplay mode is the puzzle missions, where you navigate top-down areas and move boxes to get certain ones onto your ship. They're like puzzle-focused fetch quests to make money, basically. They're neat, but fairly simple, at least early on. The last gameplay mode isn't used as much, sadly, but it's what I found the most interesting with its light RPG mechanics. It's essentially the Digger missions from Mega Man Legends, but with first-person dungeon crawler gameplay, where you command the servbots to grab things for you and solve some light platforming and combat puzzles. Later in the game, there's a few more mission variants added, but they mostly just mix up those same three with a few new mechanics. Overall, this is a really unique game, and all three of the playstyles are noticeably different and enjoyable in their own ways. But nothing about it is terribly revolutionary either, and because it's a prequel story about a set of characters exclusive to the Mega Man Legends series, which is already kind of its own side story spin-off that loosely adapts Mega Man mechanics, it just doesn't feel much like a Mega Man game. It's cool and worth checking out, but you're probably here looking for a unique take on the Mega Man formula. I mean, if you love Mega Man Legends, you probably already know about this game, so it won't really appeal to anyone else, is what I'm trying to say.
Mega Man Battle and Chase.
Mega Man Racing. Yeah, to me this is a lot like stuffing Sonic in a racing game. Like, I mean, sure, racers are popular, but why? He's already faster than a car, so why not just let him run? Oh, right. They tried that. Ugh. Yeah, it's probably better when he's in a car, I guess. But in Mega Man's case, it's more the idea of murder robots driving cars just being silly, especially without any kind of story justification in the game. It's one thing for Bowser and Mario to share some casual sporting rivalry, since they clearly have a weird cuckold relationship with Peach and don't actually hate each other. But with Mega Man, I mean, these robot masters are specifically programmed to kill Mega Man, Proto Man, and their friends. But yeah, sure, drive by and leave them in the dust, man. I will say though, silliness aside, this game's actually pretty rad. It's another one I never played growing up because it never actually released in the US, only Japan and Europe, so I didn't find out about it until the Mega Man X collection on GameCube included it as an unlockable extra. I didn't really appreciate it back then, but now I see how cool and unique it is compared to other kart racers. It controls kinda bad, with the lack of analog support making for a lot of bumping around when turning, but the core concept is still strong. Each racer has a special ability that can be activated anytime as long as you have enough special bar, like Mega Man attacking with his Mega Buster or full-blown charge shot when the meter is full, and Proto Man being able to shift his shield behind him to block projectiles or shoot out a blast in front with the full meter. My favorite is Quick Man, because while he has no offensive ability, his meter allows him to boost pretty effectively, which is great for maintaining first place since you don't really need offensive ability up there, and it can give you an edge if you go off-road or through a speed trap, which is easy to do because of the aforementioned chunky controls. There's also a variety of different battle items you can get by destroying a certain number of obstacles on the tracks, with some items that screw racers over by extending the amount they need to destroy. This is supposed to play on the Mega Man power-up mechanic, where you beat enemies and get stuff, but you can also get wrecked by some of the bigger obstacles if you aren't careful, so it's a give-and-take system that sets this game apart and introduces some neat battle mechanics into a traditional racer. Even cooler is that when you win a race, you can take a part from an enemy robot to customize your own kart with new stats and abilities. If this all sounds really cool, that's because it is. It's a little weird that you can't see what the parts do until you choose what you want and then go to the customization list, but a lot of PS1 games had janky quality of life features like that, so I chalk it up to a sign of the times. Add to that a great variety of tracks and a surprisingly rich number of playable racers, and you have a really competent racer that Capcom apparently didn't feel confident would compete with Mario Kart and Crash Racing, so they just didn't release it over here. They also barely released it in Europe, as it's missing a lot of content from the Japanese version, such as story, cinematics, and voice acting. Which is a real shame, because it makes the final product kind of hollow outside of the enjoyment of just playing the game and stealing parts off your opponent's cars. But let's be honest, carjacking is its own reward, so That's fine.
Mega Man X and Mission.
Okay, so we've had an arcade fighter, a sports game, and a racing game. All pretty weird, but when you hear Mega Man, what's the first, most obvious genre you can think of for a spin-off? Let's say it at the same time. 3, 2, 1, RPG! Wait, what did you say? Don't be ridiculous. Obviously, a slow, turn-based RPG is the best fit for an action platformer spin-off. Look at Yakuza 7. All joking aside though, I actually really like what this game does with the traditional Mega Man mechanics, and it's got a surprisingly solid RPG battle system. It adds some more action-oriented mechanics to the turn-based battles, with short mini-games for a lot of the special abilities and fast-paced trigger commands. Even outside of battle, you move pretty quick and smoothly, and have a dash you can use to break through objects to obtain treasure, which is a lot more fitting than slowly opening a treasure chest. Though it is pretty weird that enemy encounters are random rather than having them on the map, as it leaves the levels feeling extremely empty, even if it might have just been a development issue at the time. That seems like a change that could have helped make this game feel more Mega Man-y. There's also a pretty compelling story that takes place after the ongoing Mega Man X timeline, with fan favorites like X, Zero, and Sigma. Also, Axel is there.
It's only me.
And it introduces some hit-or-miss new playable characters that have admittedly never been seen since, but still serve their purposes as healer, thief, and more. Spider is my favorite of the newbies. He has a cool design and a cooler personality. While there's no proper stage select menu, the story still flows through chunks of missions that end with boss battles against traditional Mega Man X Mavericks, and while their designs, and especially their voice acting, won't end up on any best bosses lists, I've been so starved for good new Mega Man X content, I'll take whatever I can get with this stuff now.
So, you've come.
Overall, there's a lot to like about this mostly forgotten role-playing gem, and while you wouldn't think slowing down and distilling the Mega Man X gameplay into a turn-based battle system would work, I think it's actually one of the better examples of a Mega Man X game, sadly, even if it doesn't fit the style of the other games in the series. The battle system is definitely the highlight of the game, as the rest is fairly generic, but it's still a worthy spin-off title and definitely worth a play if you can find a copy. Luckily, it was on both GameCube and PS2, with some slight differences between the versions, so it's probably a little more common at retro stores. Though admittedly neither sold very well, so good luck. And there we have it, a whole slew of genre-bending spin-off titles in the pantheon of Mega Man games spanning 3 decades. It's honestly really cool to me that the franchise has taken such risks with their characters, especially since now we're lucky to even get a new numbered entry in any of the series, much less anything risky. But hey, that's why they're putting out all those legacy collections, I guess. See if there's interest in more. Maybe there will be a future where weird spin-off titles see a return. I'd be happy if we just got a good Mega Man X9, and maybe a revival of Mega Man Legends 3 exclusively for Switch. Anything else at this point is probably pushing it. But, while we're already dreaming, anyone else remember that Maverick Hunter FPS demo video that came out almost a decade ago? I wasn't a huge fan of some of the aesthetic choices, but if any other series deserves the Metroid Prime treatment, I think it'd be Mega Man. So I'm still hoping the newly rejuvenated Capcom sees the future appeal of this franchise and starts taking risks again soon. But that's a topic for another video, probably. For now, I've been Zero Score, and I hope you've been entertained. Why don't you let me know what kind of future weird spin-off title you'd want to see Capcom make for the Mega Man franchise? That sounds fun. Also, if you played the drinking game, did you even make it this far? Are you seeing this? Are you alive? Leave a comment if you're not dead. Until next time, buy the Mega Man Zero ZX collection so Capcom will love us again. My favorite is Quickman, because while he has no offensive ability, offensive. Different pronunciation. Offensive. He's also probably not offensive, let's be honest. Seems like a cool guy. Since you don't really need since you don't really need this word is bending me. Anyway, they use these battle chick. Roll. Battle chick. Okay, so we've had an arcade fighter, a racing game, and what's the other one? I got wrote this or anything. Okay, so we've had an action. Why am I like this?